The Node Runners community in the Netherlands is quite hardcore. They have these little badges they give out. I became an honorary member about 3 years ago, despite not being Dutch, or running a node back then. I now do run a node, don't worry, I'm all good. But yeah, they're a lovely, wonderful Dutch community, and Bert is also a member of the Node Runners. He's also running various mining plants around the Netherlands, and today he's going to be talking to us about how you can turn renewable surplus into heat and Bitcoin revenue. So, Bert de Groot, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you for the nice shout out, both to the Node Runners and yeah, also of course the past, let's say. So I wanted to take you a little bit through the timeline of my Bitcoin journey, so you have a bit of an idea of where the practical implementations have gone through over the past years, and then we are going to summarize a little bit into what I think will be the future that we're going to see. And I might come back a little bit towards Terahash and also into the French endeavor that we just discussed, because there's quite some interesting things going on in Europe in general. And I think we have to remain optimistic about hash rate indeed going into Europe. And we haven't seen a full hash rate chart on any of the two former presentations, and there will be one in mine. So, and there you will see a nice dominance of the US, where we just discussed the Mara part. So I think that's very interesting by itself. If someone has ever seen a presentation by me, I always start with the Satoshi Nakamoto quote. And of course, this time, again, a different one. So, the usefulness of the exchanges made possible by Bitcoin will far exceed the cost of electricity used. Therefore, not having Bitcoin would be a net waste. Now, at the end, I will basically break this down a little bit more and go a bit more into detail with regards to this note. And I hope you understand a bit more about the value of Bitcoin in a broad sense. It's not just this energy and mining part, it's a bit broader than that. So, going through the story of my timeline, in 2021, I basically quit everything I was doing. I wanted to focus only on Bitcoin, and I gave myself 2 years to found a company. And if after 2 years that company was not profitable, I would quit and we would go back to the fiat mines and mine as much Bitcoin as possible just by earning, you know, euros. Very boring. But I had to start at home. And at that time, just before the Russia crisis, super interesting, it was very, very cheap because I started a business and I could get a business contract. And at that time, I could get a business contract for 4 cents a kilowatt hour for power in the Netherlands. At that moment, we were still drilling gas in the Netherlands. That's all stopped now. And we had an abundant energy supply. So businesses could get kilowatt hours very cheaply in the Netherlands at that moment. So, of course, at that moment, you were not able to actually get like these really nice devices that you see here that Joe brought. And I also brought one, so I can give it to one of the speakers that's coming next. And I had to buy like really expensive devices, and I had to import them either from China or the US. There were not really suppliers in Europe at that time that were sufficiently at scale. And a machine like that would easily cost more than 10,000 euros. So to heat my home, it was a bit of an investment, but I wanted to try it anyway because I wanted to know everything about Bitcoin mining and see where it would go. So this is the sound. And I have a wife, and she's still with me, luckily. So you can imagine that my wife was not really happy with this, right? Like that's a 90 plus decibel sound, and there was nothing on the market that was more silent at the moment. But I could make her a little bit happy because I started to design boxes and also throw all the designs of these boxes, so sound dampening boxes, versions, many versions, very many different versions, on the internet, open source it. So everyone could start mining at home with these industrial miners, with sound dampening, but also fireproofing. So the panels are also fireproofing. And yeah, I could dry, and you see my wife in the background there. So I could dry the clothes at home, you know, really nice. So I built a dryer, you know, a Bitcoin dryer, so I was very proud. I put that on the internet, and that just got like 100,000 views, quite a bit already, and I was like, okay, oh, that's interesting, and people started to ask, like, oh, can you help me? And of course, I could help out a little bit. So I started to design more and more boxes and helping people out with optimal designs for their specific locations. And building more and more of these little installations where it made sense. And as you could see, the design changed from dual pipes to single pipes, larger dimensions, also in certain directions with where we could really channel the heat through the buildings. So we did a lot of different versions. Over 20 versions were produced. All the designs were basically open, so everyone could just rebuild it themselves. So then, from 2021, it was nice because I had that 4-cent contract, and then 2022 happened, and Russia came in. And then my electricity price went from 4 cents to 30. So that means that it's just loss-making. You know, like it's super costly to mine. So I had to find a place, and it was very coincidental. There was a greenhouse nearby, and the greenhouse had a fixed electricity contract, but the natural gas price exploded, and they still had a 5-cent kilowatt-hour contract. So I told the greenhouse, I'll pay you 5 cents, and you get heat for free. I was like, oh, that's a good deal, so you can come and install, and I started to build in a greenhouse. And in that greenhouse, of course, that went viral, so on X it had like over 1 million views, and the phone started ringing, so we could do more greenhouses. And that's what happened. And then this little greenhouse with tulips came along at the end of 2022, and we installed a lot more than just greenhouses, actually. So this is the tulip greenhouse. It went across the globe. I was on CNN, I was on Euronews, so all the big media picked it up because they liked the combination of tulips, you know, with mining, you know, it's a tulip bubble, so I always had to say something funny about that, you know, in front of the camera. And if you look at this, is a massive, like they are doing 36 million tulips. If you buy a tulip at the Lidl or the Aldi in Europe, most likely this tulip is coming from this greenhouse and is actually grown with Bitcoin heat. So most people are not even knowing this, but in the background, this is of course already happening for 4 years now. But a lot more installations than that, you know. This is a place, just 2 miners, but access, a lot of solar there. It's called, it's for horses. It's a huge horse location. We built it like, it's of course a bit like, it doesn't look extremely professional, but it's extremely efficient and it's extremely worth it because he had very cheap input, like a full shed of solar panels where he didn't get any money for, and he needed the heat anyway. And we built it very silently, so he could basically push it into his office and into some other areas of the building. And it made sense to build something like that. Similar to warehouse, also running on natural gas heat, a lot of solar panels on the top, and we even built it with basically different ducts, so we could actually get the heat either going from outside, the air from the outside to the outside in the summer, and also from inside to inside in the winter with like valves, and it was all manual valves because we only have to reset it twice a year. And if you look at this installation, it's also, you don't hear this 90 decibels. And this 90 decibels is basically fully dampened by this machine. And this has also been running for 4 years now. And the main thing here is that they use a shit ton of natural gas in this warehouse to keep a base heat level for all the products, because it needs to stay at a certain heat. And this would basically supply, this is a big warehouse, but this would supply sufficient heat to basically reduce the natural gas to almost zero. So, and the excess capacity, so the roof is fully with solar, was not delivering any money anyway. So in the summer, it was also an additional revenue stream. So return on investment on the greenhouse or on this was in general a little bit over a year even, like a very short return of investment. And a lot of these businesses, have been very happy. So this was also on the national radio. The owner explained it on national radio, super positive story. So if you look at these kind of examples, it makes sense. But it's small scale. So 2023, I was asked to go a bit bigger, look at bigger industries, bigger installations, and I started to do a lot of calculations and talk with a few larger manufacturers in the Netherlands. And we made a lot of plans, and then it always boils down to one main thing, is what is the future expectation of the Bitcoin price for these large companies? That's in general really still the big driver. But if you look in the Netherlands, there is a shit ton of large megawatt facilities. As Charlie just mentioned, Germany doesn't have them, the Netherlands has them. if you buy a pepper, if you buy a tomato anywhere in the supermarket in Europe, if they are coming from the Netherlands, it's very likely they are heated with Bitcoin mining. The guy was actually at the Madeira conference, Jelmer, when we had the conference there. This is one of his containers, and I also did some maintenance in these containers. I went to many projects to see if we could even scale it into industry, but we see that we have quite a few of these large containers, which are 2 megawatt, so it's a standardized 2 megawatt container, sometimes multiple of them, which are heating the greenhouse, but not only doing that, they're also actively on this market doing the grid balancing. So the grid balancing also brings in a lot of revenue, just like what was explained by Charlie, but that's already live in the Netherlands for now, I think over 5 years on relatively large scale, which is, I mean, like multiple megawatts in practice running. So yeah, some new projects went on there, not naming names, so I just show you the inside of the container. But this stuff is running, and we have had also some industry people visiting these containers to really see how this was built up. Then, 2024, back to home mining. Because exactly what Joe is showing here behind me is open source mining started. And instead of having to buy a 10,000 euro machine, now everyone can mine at home. And as Joe just mentioned, you can just buy a little machine for 50 euros these days. So you don't have to like go into great lengths in very complex where to buy it. No, there is like 100 plus shops in Europe already that are selling these little devices for just a few euros, and you can join the lottery. Because in the end, Bitcoin mining, you try to guess that very stupid random number. And if you guess that stupid random number, you get more than 3 Bitcoin. And this is happening already. Back when I was on stage in Amsterdam, presenting about the BitX, we built a huge BitX stand with a BitX B at the entrance. And people were laughing at me because I presented that if 1 million people are running such a device, a block will be mined every week. And that's still the case, because the miners, of course, improved a little bit, but also the hash rate went up. And it's still the case. If you buy such a little thing, if we have 1 million of these devices running, it's a block a week. So it becomes very tangible what the network is. And the network consists basically out of 1 billion of these chips. So you can have an estimate. You have a physical feel of how large this network is and how big it is. And also in 2024, we rebuilt our own home miners. Back then, home miners were still not optimal, but I started to import these very nice frames from the US, and then we would buy the ASICs itself in Europe, and we would rebuild them ourselves with different Wi-Fi connections, everything in-house, and we started to sell these kind of machines. Super cool, had photo shoot with actually a person, not AI, this is still 2024, and we started to sell these, and quite some people have this running in their houses, and also some offices across Europe. And then, 2025, these bigger ones came in. As you can see here in the background, it's nice that Joe actually brought them. And also open source mining, so just a chip from a mass manufacturer, but all the other stuff you can just rebuild yourself, you can solder it yourself, everything is open. And the difference is, such a machine that you see here or here, this is basically 5 of these little ones, and this is basically 10 of these little ones. And more people are starting to plug in a little bit larger ones, like these, which is open source, so you can really verify everything that is on there, so you really know what you're plugging in. But also, of course, the Chinese could not let this happen, right? So Canaan came in, and Canaan started to produce home miners en masse. You have really small ones, I didn't put them on the picture, but you even have the larger ones, which we're actually selling quite a lot, because they're high quality, you get a 1-year guarantee, and what you see is they actually look like a freaking heater. So it's just like, you know, like how a heater looks. And people are plugging this shit in en masse everywhere across the globe. It's super nice because we get a larger and larger percentage of the network that will never be turned off because people are actually using it for their home and for their heat. And this device on the left, that's like a 90 terahash. So we're talking about 90 of these small little miners that I just showed. So it's really good to see that these things are really silent. You can actually plug them in, either in your office or your home, and we don't have to do all that work that I used to do with the boxes in the beginning of time. It's just plug and play. All that work is now basically for nothing because technology has gone and improved. So that's 2025, and we see now that everything is available. There's a lot of shops, a lot of competition. So very good for Bitcoin because everything is very abundantly available, let's say, at the moment. So you can, if you want to mine, everyone can mine. Everyone in this room can plug in a machine. There's really great videos about it. It's not as difficult as it was a couple of years ago. But then comes 2026. What is going to happen now? Because what do we have? And that's why you see now there, we've got solar, we've got nuclear, coincidentally. I didn't see your presentation before. And then we have wind. And the main driver in Europe is really on this forefront of these three pillars. And then let's have a look at this hash rate graph across the globe. What is happening across the globe? Who is actually running the network at the moment? At the moment, we see a huge share of the US. Foundry USA is basically US. And if you look at the owner of F2 Pool, which is at the bottom left, he went around the globe in a spaceship from Musk recently. And let's say that guy was the first one to try to implement some sanctions into Bitcoin mining, where he wanted to do some, let's say, transactions that were not liable for the Bitcoin network as saying sanctioned transactions. So let's say that at least this one and this one is US already. And then we have, of course, Mara, our famous Mara that we just saw in the presentation, also US-based. So if you look at this graph, we're basically approaching over 50% of the hash rate is in US hands. That's where we're looking at the moment. I don't think that looks good for decentralized networks if the US has a majority share in what is happening on Bitcoin. But luckily, we have some other pools like Antpool, Spiderpool, via BTC, which are, of course, much more independent, let's say. But let's say, where is the hash rate concentrated? Still a lot in China. And then you start to think, how is this possible? Because there was a mining ban. And back then, you know, if you remember, you guys, I don't know who's been here for a while in the Bitcoin industry, but this was huge in 2021. Like, when this happened, that's actually when I started my company, because 50% of the entire network went offline because China banned Bitcoin. Half of all these chips, all these computers went offline. And you would think like, oh my God, this is going to kill Bitcoin. No, it didn't kill Bitcoin. It made it even stronger. The hash rate came back online so rapidly, as you can see in the graph, and now it's just like a little dent in the total, just a few years ago. And the Chinese are still mining. So what happened? For Chinese people, they're in a locked-in system. They can't get their money out of China. Very much alike what we see in different parts of the world. You can't get your money out of the freaking area. Looks more and more like what is maybe also happening with the euro a bit, that we are getting more and more locked in. It's getting more difficult to get your money out of the system where you are in. So Chinese people, doesn't matter what the cost is, it can be even very unprofitable, they don't give a shit as long as they have money in the pocket that is not within their boundaries and they can use freely. That's Bitcoin. Bitcoin, in the end, is still peer-to-peer money that you can use outside of the system. So these Chinese miners went across the globe, started to plug in their miners anyway, on different places across the planet. Now, coming back to EU. So what is coming into EU? This is from the European Commission website on the 10th of March, 2026. Boosting EU's energy independence and lowering costs. And sorry for the wall of text. I don't like to have a wall of text on my slide. But I have to basically show you a little bit about what that wall of text says in this publicly shown document. We are going to put more than 75 billion of financing over the next 3 years to support clean energy transition. 75 billion to support. So there's a wall of money coming into the energy system to create more independence because of the current crisis. That's what we currently see. And there's a very interesting note here at the bottom where it says, the strategy for small modular reactors. Hey, that's nuclear. Okay, so they're focusing on implementing small modular reactors. How do you make these things directly profitable? Where can you connect them directly? Where can you actually have demand directly from wherever you're going to implement these strategies? Again, you come back to Bitcoin would make sense. So a lot of the problems with regards to becoming independent, building out our power infrastructure at a rapid pace, means that we also need demand. So Bitcoin would make sense. Now, just to give you a little bit of more hope about decentralization, is that you can actually mine a block with such a thing. Like we just mentioned, it's currently already happening every 2 weeks. And 5 weeks ago, and this is actually nice that Joe mentioned it shortly, the node runners, we run our own pool, and it's a solo mining pool, so you can just point such a little device, and there's around 300 people doing that. 300 people only. Their little device towards our own pool, and if you hit the block, you get the full reward. It's 100%. We don't take any cut. And we mined the block 5 weeks ago with such a small miner. So just to have the proof is in the eating of the pudding, this actually works. And there's like, that was 400 terahash. Like the chances are very, very low, but it happened. So we are actually in the Bitcoin blockchain forever with our little pool running from a little computer in the Netherlands with a few guys, you know, a few friends, and we hit the block. And we don't know who it is. We hope he still gives us a round or something, you know, at one of our meetups. But yeah, he got like 186,000 euros. So it was a nice win for the guy, you know. And most likely the miner went through my hands because in general I put the Node Runners pool leaflet with every little miner I shipped. So I was like, okay, that's interesting. I most likely have touched, you know, the miner that mined this block. So it's really tangible, it's really physical. So I would all urge you to at least try a little bit out with bit access, you know, the really cheap ones, to actually get a feel of what this Bitcoin mining is and to jump a bit down the rabbit hole. It's really fun. So, possible. And then, if you go back to the quote in the beginning, is the usefulness of the exchanges made possible by Bitcoin. What do you mean with the usefulness of the exchange made possible? And I just touched it a little bit on the China part, but also in the Netherlands, where we're getting massive subsidies now inputted, massive trying to build out even more renewable, more flexible, more. What makes sense? Bitcoin can be used as peer-to-peer money. A business that is actually going to invest in something with regards to Bitcoin has the only peer-to-peer money that is not fully on your own name directly, because it comes straight into the system, into your wallet. And a lot of Bitcoiners that I've also been lucky to help with over the past years really like to have money without a history. It's freshly printed, let's say, money in the Bitcoin system. And the usefulness of the exchange made possible by that means you have untraceable money in your pocket you can use globally, outside of the system. And that is actually very interesting for a lot of people. So that's also why I expect when we get more and more build out, more and more, let's say, subsidies for energy, that we will see more and more consumption for businesses, let's say, on this Bitcoin part, because they might want to have this money outside of the system capability in their hands and useful. And then will far exceed the cost of electricity used. What is going to happen when we print a shit ton of money, like what we see already here in the EU, but also in the rest of the world? Everything will be inflated. Money printer go brr, so it will far exceed the cost of the electricity used. The electricity price looks like it might go up, but if they're just printing money and they're going to far outbuild, that electricity price is not going to be as extreme, but to get your euros out of Europe, it might be more difficult. So, interesting to see where it's heading, and therefore not having Bitcoin would be a net waste. You might really want to get some in case it catches on. So, basically mining Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is saving, and therefore not your hash, not your cash. That's it, guys. Thank you.